We're in! Alright guys, hello, welcome back to Black Iron Brothers podcast. Episode 6.
First time in a while.
Yeah, been a while.
Been a bit of a hiatus. We've been busy. He was competing.
Underground. Like a bear.
He's now qualified for bench nationals.
British bench championships.
He's
pretty cool.
very good at bench pressing.
Yeah.
He's
terrible
a
at
very
everything
large
else.
man. And it's in the IPF, so stop calling him a roider because look at his arms. I know that they don't
covered
look...
up.
Well, they're still
They look
large.
as impressive in this,
You can still tell they're large.
this angle.
Anyway,
Too far away.
Q&A today.
Q&A. Something a little bit different.
So we've got a few questions lined up. Some of them quite simple. Some of them a little bit more complex.
That's offensive.
Let's not start it out like this. First question from Laura. Are you secretly a married couple?
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
This is our house. We've been together for 37 years.
Yeah. No.
Going strong. It's our, what's 40 years? Gold
Silver?
anniversary? No, 40 years feels like pretty good.
It's pretty good. It can't be gold though. That feels
We look
longer.
reasonable for our age. We're only 44. 37 years together. We got together with a 7. Yeah.
Very young.
Yeah.
No, I mean we get brothers as well sometimes. I don't feel like we look
Which
like
makes it
brothers.
weird that we're married.
Yeah.
It's odd.
It's incestuous, but it's cool. Okay, next question, which is a more legitimate question. This is from...
Don't insult that perfectly good question.
Sorry, Laura.
Yeah, that was a great
question.
People want to
Farugi.
know.
Farugi is asking, how do you reconcile the opportunity cost of pursuing goals against diminishing fitness returns? Which is a bit of a complicated question.
Reasonably eloquently said.
Yeah, I think the idea there, though, is sort of like what you're getting from, you know, how much dedication you have to give to
Cost
training
reward, basically, isn't it?
versus like everything else that you have to sacrifice because of the amount that you're training.
Sure.
And I personally think that most people don't have to sacrifice really that much at all. Like it's really not that much to ask to train an hour a day or whatever. And people who think that they can't do that mostly procrastinate.
You probably
a
wouldn't
lot.
want to train an hour a day, though.
What's that?
You want to be split up into... You don't
Well,
take
yeah, whatever the
total time wise,
whatever the break is, you know, into your week, however you want to break that up. But yeah, I mean, typically most people could fit in 3-4 training sessions.
You'll make a huge amount if you do. Yeah, even if you were starting with like 2, if you consistently did 2,
Yeah.
and we'll say we'll call it 2 hours because at the beginning when you start training, you don't have to train for as long because your intensity is lower. So in terms of rest periods are going to be shorter.
Yeah.
So you can get more done in an hour. So the reality is, if you train like 2 hours a week, which is 2 terrible shows on Netflix that you didn't really want to watch, you just click that weird shuffle button that says like
True crime
dramas.
dramas.
Yeah.
Multiple true crime dramas.
Watching horrendous things happen to other people rather than making
Training
yourself
and making your
healthy.
mental health better and your physical health better. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, there's definitely people have time to train.
It's
there's
just a priority issue.
It's a priority issue. There's a lot of the time people are going to find excuses. as to
I can
why
be
they
doing
don't
this
it.
instead. The only people that really could say that would say people that were, and all their time was working, so they worked in charity, they're always travelling, all that kind of stuff. They're running like 7 businesses and they have literally no time, which most people always tend to. Even you see people like incredibly busy people having.
Gary Vee still has a PT.
Yeah, they just recruit them to come along with them, or they travel around, or they recruit someone in the city where they are.
Yeah.
So the answer is it's not.
There's typically always a way to train.
It's not really going to be taken away from anything else unless you have no time whatsoever.
Yeah. Which is just so unlikely. I don't think I know anyone.
Yeah, start with an hour.
I know very high placed people in like big corporations and companies. They still find time to train.
Yeah.
Like, there's a way to do it.
Start with an hour and work up.
Next exercise from Katie. Best exercise to grow
Next exercise, next question.
What did I say?
Next exercise.
Did I say next exercise?
Next exercise!
Next exercise. Sorry, next question.
Following on from the previous exercise that we just did.
Next question is from Katie, and it's best exercise to grow your glutes.
Okay.
This is quite a common question.
Ambiguous one in a sense.
A lot of people love hip thrusts.
Yeah.
I think they're fine, hip thrusts. I just find they're a bit annoying to set up more than anything else.
If you're big, it can be annoying to get underneath the bar.
Yeah.
It can be a right pain.
And
Great for just targeting the glutes. And overload.
Yeah.
So that can be why people often work in terms of progressive overload. You can lift the most on a hip thrust.
Yeah, definitely. You can go
probably
very, very...
any exercise.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people who can like hip thrust 180 kilos, but they can't necessarily RDL like 100.
Or deadlift. In the hip thrust more than they can deadlift.
Yeah.
So that's quite common in the gym.
But very common, in fact. Yeah. So I would say that you don't want to overly bias just that movement. It would be good if you can either cycle in and out into your blocks of training, either hip thrust or RDL or like a stiff leg deadlift or whatever. And you've got to make sure
you're doing the hip thrust correctly. You're not, driving your head backwards and just throwing your hips in the air. You're actually engaging the glutes by
And also not enough range of motion as well. Sometimes they're not actually getting to the full range where they're getting a peak contraction in the glutes. So I think I probably prefer an RDL actually, just for overall hypertrophy of the posterior chain. I think it's such a great exercise for working on glutes, hamstrings, erector spinae, the lumbar musculature, all of that. But hip thrust is a great one as well. You can throw in like some glute kickback stuff and all that, but the reality is it's not the best. Yeah, I mean those are things you can add on.
Squats, people often say.
Split squats are amazing
if you take that a really forward step.
Yeah. So if you wanted to have it biased slightly more towards quad on the front leg, you would keep the front foot a little bit closer in, and then that knee is going to shift further forward, and then you're going to get more quad activity.
More of an acute angle at the leg.
Yeah. So if you're just driving that foot forwards, the knee is going to shift further. Well, not as far forward, and therefore more glute.
More glute.
Yeah.
So the people
that's a really good one.
Thrust, Romanians.
Yeah.
Or what we were talking about earlier. Stiff leg.
Stiff leg, yeah. So stiff leg deadlift would just be like an RDL, but you're going to the floor, not a straight leg deadlift. The straight leg deadlift is like actually a straight leg, and we're not a fan of that.
Why do they have to have a different name?
I'm going off what Trained by JP says. I'll listen to. He's very good, so I'll listen to how he divides those exercises.
But also, it's just a Romanian to the floor,
It's a Romanian to the floor, but with a dead stop at the bottom, so it's kind of a little bit different. Whereas an RDL typically is just like just past the knee.
You could do RDLs to the it's as steep as you can go with your.
Well, as low as your hamstring mobility will allow.
So technically, that could be the floor.
I suppose so. Yeah.
Pointless extra name.
Don't you talk to Trained by JP like that?
I'm not talking to you.
So next question. Next exercise.
Did we ask that question? We sort of gave. There's lots of options to it.
Yeah, there's lots of options, but I think the best ones are probably hip thrusts, RDLs, stiff leg deadlift, whatever. And combine. If you want to do those, like you could do RDL and hip thrust every week as well. You don't have to do one or the other. You could have one primary day for RDL, one primary day for hip thrust. If you're trying to bias more posterior chain work, Mo asks, are deadlifts necessary for hypertrophy? That's a great question.
Great question.
Really good question.
So there's loads of nuance to this question as well. So if we're looking at, let's put the simple answer, no.
No.
They're not necessary. And nor is any exercise technically necessary. It's the great caveat between, and we spoke about this before in progressive overload, it's, with deadlifts typically for, 90% of people, they can lift the most on that.
Yeah.
Compared to many other exercises, although we just mentioned the other one where they can potentially do more, which is hip thrust, but it's not the same in terms of, overall muscle recruitment. It's more of an isolation, although it's a complement at the same time. So your intensity means more progressive overload, so the more potential to build muscle mass typically, but then you have to look at deadlifts are the most neurally fatiguing. So strain on the CNS is going to be the highest with deadlifts, and that's often the battle people play up in their head. So it's often if you feel great on deadlifts and it doesn't affect your recovery too much, I think they're a brilliant exercise. They are fatiguing, but in terms of overall development and strength... And
if you can feel your musculature working on the deadlift as well, it's probably that it's actually working. Now, that doesn't mean that you should be feeling your lumbar spine massively on your deadlift. That's probably that you're maybe rounding a little bit in your lumbar spine.
You don't have your spine at all.
Like, typically what we're going to bias in a deadlift anyway is a straight lumbar position and slight thoracic rounding.
Yeah.
That's going to give you, like, a really strong deadlift.
So you see a lot of the really, really big deadlifters
Some of the biggest deadlifters in the world.
They'll round that upper back, but if you actually look at the consistent part of their lumbar spine, it will always flip in that neutral range. You'll never see it, even though it will look really extreme that their right hunched over here, you won't really see too much deviation.
And it's also that they tend to not increase the amount of rounding as the movement progresses. They hold whatever rounding they have in the thoracic spine. It's definitely not necessary. If you're trying to get hypertrophy, again, of the posterior chain, if we're going to just talk about like purely hypertrophy of the posterior chain, I'd probably pick an RDL over a deadlift if we're just talking about...
Most bodybuilders would pick that with you.
Yeah, and that's why there's so many bodybuilders who don't actually deadlift and just do RDLs.
And they'll take it to another step. They'll take it to... They'll often set up at racks where you have a pin on the outside of the rack in order to reduce the fatigue of having to pick the weight up in the first
place. So you're
place.
picking it up from a shrug position, basically.
So it's much lighter.
And then you go into
you
RDL.
Straight into the...
so it allows you to just not have to work at that bottom range where
you can start on the stretch phase rather than have to start on that concentric phase.
Yeah. So no, they're not necessary. We both like them a lot. Great. They're such a great exercise for building strength, and they are a good exercise for building size as well. So they are really good. I wouldn't say
traps, erectors, hamstrings, quads, glutes.
Like, I've always been quite blessed as far as my traps, and like I've never really done, like my traps kind of blew up as soon as I started deadlifting. Like I'm quite genetically gifted for traps. I just started deadlifting and my traps built. So
mine just goes neck, shoulder.
Yeah. But he does look enormous because his lats.
That's the only reason I have long hair.
I look like an ogre, and he looks like a bodybuilder.
Just to hide my lack of traps.
Because you're embarrassed.
People think it's a fashion choice. It's actually crippling insecurity.
Crippling trap insecurity.
I've never tied my hair up.
Just in case people
go tie it up, and I go, no, I'm leaving.
Yeah. You just tears start coming out as soon as the hair ties up, and you just tears.
Competition. They let me do 2 lifts with my hair down, and then the third one, they're like, tie your hair up. What is this?
This looks a mess.
This is a shambles. So I just left.
Somewhat. You're throwing shade at the IPF right now.
It's not true. It's a lie. All of that was a lie.
What's that? What
I did. I tied my hair up, and I did do the last lift.
And it was fine.
Yeah. She was actually very nice, the lady told me to tie my hair up.
She was very sweet. She was a sweet old lady.
Yeah, she was a very high level judge.
Yeah.